And now Ken Savin is going to join us and talk a little bit about the importance of science, just period. And we certainly know that. Trained as an organic chemist, he spent nearly 2 decades at Eli Lilly in various forms of drug development. But he migrated into space, as it were, beginning to do experiments that were eventually carried on the International Space Station. In fact, 5 major experiments that were taken into space and worked on there. So the technological intersection of science and space and experimentation has led him to become the senior program director in space production at the Center for the Advancement of Science in Space, where he leads the International Space Station's U.S. National Lab. Please welcome Ken Savin.
Yeah, that's great. Hi, everyone. It's been a fantastic day. You look at these speakers, and they're really remarkable. And for me, it's really intimidating to see some people who I think of as legends come up here and speak about what they do. And I'll also tell you that before the program started, somebody came up to me and said, "Are you nervous?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'm nervous." And you know why I'm nervous? It's because the last 24 hours, people have been telling me what they want to hear. I've got a list here. We want to hear about Elon Musk, SpaceX, Richard Branson, Virgin Galactic, Mars, Jeff Bezos, Blue Origin, Mars again, children and their role, Neil Armstrong, Apollo spacesuits. It might be Neil Armstrong's spacesuit, I'm not sure. How we benefit in our daily lives from activities done in space. That was Randy's. Women as pioneers in space, and a real example of where we do something commercially significant in microgravity. The problem is I turned my slides in last week. But if you keep track, I am going to hit all those topics, I guarantee you. I was asked to come here and tell you my story like the other speakers, and I am not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to tell you our story, because what I'm talking about, and this is something that I had to learn over the last 8 years that I've been sort of involved in the aerospace industry, is that the things that are happening are us. It's not a group of people at NASA who are removed, right? The Apollo missions were fantastic, and we saw it. Well, some of you saw it. I missed it, but it was something somebody else did. And what I learned is that what's happening now, and the topic I'm going to go over, is really focused on things that ordinary Americans are participating in. So with that, it's a hard topic to connect to. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use a historic analogy, something that we can kind of connect with. And through that, I'm hoping you will not only be able to better relate to the topic and sort of understand it, but perhaps we can all start to make some predictions about where it's all headed. Now, the topic I was asked to speak on is commercial space. And people, when I started coming up with this and was talking to some of my friends about it, "Oh, you're going to talk about office buildings and warehouses?" No. We're talking about commercial activities that are happening in space, mostly in low Earth orbit, but we, of course, are going to go beyond that. And the historic analogy I am going to use is the California gold rush, because I believe we are at the beginning of a kind of gold rush. It's hard for us being in its infancy, to see it, but that's what I think is happening. The people who participated in the gold rush were called Argonauts. An Argonaut is a person who takes on a risky but potentially profitable venture. And I think that's what the people during the gold rush did. Now, just a little background. In the spring of 1848, a guy named James W. Marshall was wandering around near the job site he was working at in northern central California, and he saw something in a stream. He bent down and picked it up. It was a small golden pebble. He had seen gold before, of course, because gold was used as money. But to find it there in the dirt, that was remarkable. As the story goes, he put the pebble on a stone and struck it with a rock. And it didn't break, didn't crack. It kind of flattened out. It was malleable. It was gold. And the events that would ripple out from that point would change not only this newly acquired territory of California, but the United States as a whole, and thousands upon thousands of lives. The first point I want to make is that there is a barrier for us, normal Americans, to try to understand how we connect with this whole thing of work in space, commercial space. It is a physical barrier. How do you get there? But it's a psychological barrier. As I said, it's something somebody else does. So let's go back to 1849. You notice what's happening. Hey, people are finding gold out in the streams. And you want to tell your cousins back in upstate New York to come out, be a part of it. So how do you tell them? There's no Facebook. There's no internet-enabled email, no cell phones or texting, not even telegraph. That wouldn't be invented for another 30 years. You're going to sit down and write a letter. Remember those days when people used to sit down and write a letter? And then you're going to mail it. And what are you going to say? This is Cousin Billy from Mountain California. People are picking gold out of the dirt. Your cousins are going to think Billy's got a problem. People did it. They mailed letters. They actually, some cases, went on their own. And they traveled, most cases, all the way around, the mail or the people, all the way around South America up the East Coast to go and tell these people what was happening. And then these people get these letters, and what are they going to do? You're telling them to give up their lives, sell just about everything they own, their homes, say goodbye to everybody they know there because they're never coming back. These are people that have probably never been more than 50 miles from where they were born in their lives. And you're telling them to head out into the frontier, 3,000 miles into the unknown. And that's if they're doing it by land, right? Get to St. Louis and wait for the spring and then make a run for it. Or you're going to get on a boat and go all the way around South America. Most of them actually went to Panama. There was no canal, but you'd get to Panama and then hike for 50 miles through the malaria-infested jungle and get to the Pacific side and wait for a boat. But people did it. People did it because they didn't have hope in that time, not the way we do. Prosperity wasn't something that you could work for. You worked for your lives, and that was it. If you were poor, you were going to be poor. And now they were handing out lottery tickets in California, and people took advantage of it. People were able to overcome the psychological barrier of giving up their lives and going for it, and getting out there, the physical barrier. Well, the physical barrier is being broken for space. And as was talked about before, going from Space Shuttle to the SpaceX Falcon 9 to the Falcon Heavy, the price is coming down. And it's becoming routine. People are launching on a regular basis now. In fact, I saw a presentation where a general of the US Space Force said that last year the United States launched 51 rockets, 51 resupply missions into space for various activities, satellites, transport to the space station. The price is coming down and it's becoming routine. And as I said before, ordinary people are starting to participate. And the organizations that are shipping those people and that material into space are making money. You may recognize some of these individuals. Jeff Bezos and Richard Branson are running tourism. That's what they're trying to do. There's going to be bumps in the road, but they're sending ordinary people. That is ordinary if you believe billionaires and William Shatner are ordinary. But you know what I'm saying, right? They're not just professional astronauts anymore. And I know for a fact that Jeff Bezos has plans to build his own space station called the Orbital Reef, already in the works. And then there's Elon Musk. Elon Musk is not in a different league. He's playing an entirely different game than everybody else, and he's winning at it. It's very good. If you just look at what that man has been able to accomplish with his company, it is fantastic. And if it wasn't for him, we would right now be dependent upon the Russians for access to space. Think about that. So back to our heroes and heroine. Picks and shovels. What are the enablers to do work in space, to do that commercial work in space? Well, if we go back to the gold rush, you can see the detritus there in front of them. Picks, shovels, pails, pan, all their clothing, that sluice, that's that trough that they're working on there. Materials had to be brought over, and the organizations that brought that stuff over made money. When it got there, you had to go to the general store. That's where you bought your picks and shovels and equipment to enable the work that would be done there. People made good money. They were selling shovels for the equivalent of several $100s a shovel. There's an oddity in this picture. There's a woman. Women were not miners. They did not mine. Okay? It was dirty, brutal, dangerous work. And in this pre-Victorian era, it was just unacceptable. But what is she doing there? Well, if you look at what she's got in her arm, on her hand there, it alludes to what her role was. She was delivering a meal. She has a basket. They did that. This is the Grubhub of 1850. You're looking at it right there. Women had opportunities that they would not normally have. Okay, there weren't many women in California, and people asked me, oh, were they prostitutes? Some of them were. The euphemism was soiled doves. But most of the women led normal, relatively normal lives for that period of time. And they had opportunities. The men were in the field, so what do? They ran the saloons. They owned the hotels. They ran the laundry services. One woman made a near fortune baking and selling pies. One guy took it to the extreme, a guy named Sam Brennan. He was at the same site that James Marshall was. He was at Sutter's Mill. He owned his own little general store at Sutter's Mill with his buddy, and they started to see what was happening. People weren't showing up to work anymore. They were just down in the stream digging for gold. And he said, well, the only logical thing is to go out into that, to become a part of it, to go buy some picks and shovels. But he did it a little different. He went into San Francisco and he bought every pick and every shovel from every store, put them in a warehouse, and then he held a one-man parade, waving his arms around, walking up and down Market Street, yelling, gold, 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 gold from the American River. This is a picture of the American River in the early 1850s. Sam Brennan made a fortune. He became one of the largest landowners in the state of California. There's two items I want you, two concepts I want you to pull from this picture. The first is, if you look at it, it is convoluted, ugly, industrial, almost primitive. But in fact, you have to consider they don't have engines or motors like we're used to. They don't have electricity. They have to use the power of the water. They're working within the bounds of nature. They became very efficient at it. You'll have a chance in a couple of slides to decide whether or not you think this is really primitive. The other item I want you to notice is right in the front at the bottom of the picture. There's a gentleman holding his daughter's hand. See that? She's wearing bloomers, if you look really closely. It's perfect. We will take our children to space. They'll come as families, or we'll have children in space. It's going to happen. It's part of being a human. It may, it's hard for us to look at this and not have some strong emotion from looking at that picture of this young girl among all these men in this setting. But we'll take pictures of our kids when we're in space. And a couple centuries hence, our descendants will look at those pictures, have some of the same feelings you're having right now. Let's talk about children for just a second. So they're going to come with us, but the people who are children, and some of them are young individuals here, they're the ones who are going to get us to Mars. I'm an old guy, right? I'd love to go to Mars, and just like Richard, it would be fantastic, maybe. I don't know, 14 months there and back, but our children are the ones who are going to get us there. You can bet on it. It would be a bad bet to bet against them. So what are the tools and enablers that we have today? Is it new in space that we would have people selling equipment that would enable our work in space? No, it's been going on for years. This is from the Apollo missions. If you need, I'd say you're sending a couple of astronauts to the moon and you want them to take that one small step, they better have a spacesuit. So who do you go to? Who's going to build your spacesuit for you? Well, you go to the people who are the best at it, right? American industry, the people who are experts in form-fitting garments that are maybe made of latex or rubberized fabrics. You go to Playtex, the people who make bras. They won the contract to make the spacesuits for the Apollo missions. They actually had the contract stolen from them and then won it back. They went on to make all the spacesuits, and they still make spacesuits for NASA. Now, I told you I was going to have a picture of Neil Armstrong in a spacesuit. That is not Neil Armstrong, that is Buzz Aldrin. But if you look really closely, in the reflection in his visor, you can see Neil Armstrong taking a picture of him. So I'm going to check that one off on the thing. So people are making tools, modern American companies are making tools that are enabling our work in space, and it's trickling back down to us. The tools that enable that work in space and the things that we're learning in space are coming out in products that we use every day. Memory foam mattresses, Mylar insulating materials. One of the first laptop computers was developed and produced for use on a space shuttle flight. Even GPS, where would we be without GPS, right? That is a product of our ability to access and do work in space. But what about the gold mine? This is the gold mine. This is what it looks like. Now, remember what the American River looked like. You thought that was primitive and convoluted. Look at that picture. She's got wires and tubes and stuff going everywhere. She's got diaper wipes stuck to the wall. She's looking through a microscope that is stuck to the ceiling. And she's sitting there floating, and she's got Velcro on her pants so her tools don't float away. This alludes to the power that we have, the ability to do things that you cannot do otherwise if you don't have access to space. Microgravity. It is impossible to produce extended periods of microgravity on the ground. You just can't do it. But you can do it in orbit. That is what we're taking advantage of. For the most part, people are taking pictures, just as we've seen in some of the previous presentations, from the space station looking at the ground. The satellite imagery is really powerful. People are going to space because they want access to space, to the vacuum of space. But better than 85% of all the research being done on station is happening inside, and it's taking advantage of microgravity. Now, I don't want to say that we're not still developing tools going forward, tools that will also have an impact on our lives. So let's say that we're getting into orbit around Mars, and a very, very important piece breaks, and you need it. I mean, you really, really need that piece. What are you going to do? You call the guys back at NASA, hey, can you launch me piece XYZ? Even if they launch it that day, it's going to take 14 months to get to you. If you really, really needed it, you're probably really, really dead by the time it gets there. So what do? You bring the general store with you. In this, it's a fabricator. This one actually prints in 3 dimensions objects out of metal. You can make items out of titanium in this case. There's also printers that print in ceramic, print in plastic, and they're right now developing one that prints in tissue. So you could put replacement people parts on there as well. And the parts would be based on your own genetics from your own stem cells. And in this case, you don't have to wait the 14 months. You just have them send you the plans. That's 14 minutes. Or you don't even have to have them send the plans. Bring the plans on a memory drive. You can have millions and millions of parts, and your memory drive will never weigh any more than it does when you start. But what about the gold? That's what we really want to talk about. So I'm going to just go back here, just say really quickly a comment about this. This is a loop, a metal loop that has been dipped in sugar water. You have never seen this because on Earth, you would never be able to do this. You dip it in, you pull it out, gravity would tug on it, pull it all over to one end of the loop, and it would drip off. Right? That's what happens, unless you're making soap bubbles. But for just sugar water, you'd never see it. But when you remove the force of gravity, all the other factors that were shrouded by gravity become dominant. In this case, water tension, adhesion, and cohesion. And if you sit and wait, the water evaporates and you start to produce these crystals. Now, we've learned something about growing crystals in space. The crystals grown in microgravity tend to be larger, more ordered, they're more perfect, they have less imperfections in the matrix, and they tend to be uniform. They have the same shape and size compared to one another. Now, you may look at this picture and say, well, hold on a second. You said they're going to be same shape and size, but there's different shapes. You're looking at some of the crystals edge on and some of them from the side, but as it turns out, it's a really good example. They're about the same size, and they are the same shape. At this point, you should be asking yourselves, well, Ken, so what? Well, it turns out that some parts of American industry really depend on certain aspects of crystal production, uniformity, like I just talked about, crystals being the same size and shape. One product that suffers from this challenge is Keytruda. Keytruda is a monoclonal antibody, which is a large protein product that is used in immunotherapy. It entices your body's own immune system to fight cancer. So this is a treatment for cancer that is used with standard chemotherapies. It's extremely effective, and Merck, the producer, makes a lot of money from it. It's well north of $10 billion in revenue each year. And it's worth it. It works. But they have a challenge. And the challenge is when they make it on scale, it tends to be a mixture of crystals. The problem with that is you have to make the same mixture every time, which adds to complexity in your production scheme. Also, because it's a mixture, you have to treat it like a mixture of products. When you go to deliver it, you have to deal with it that way. So there's added cost in production and on delivery. A friend of mine, a guy named Paul Reichert, looked at this. He's a crystal growing expert who works at Merck. And he said, I wonder if we could use the uniformity properties that we get from doing crystal growing in space on Keytruda. And this is the results of the study. So on the left is Keytruda that was grown terrestrially at Merck in their lab. And you can see it's a mixture of different sizes and shapes. And on the right are the crystals that were grown in microgravity on the International Space Station. You can see they're tiny spherical crystal balls, very similar in shape and size. That is real commercial value, that you can get a patent on that. You can protect that product beyond its normal life now because you have new crystals. And I don't want you to think, well, hold on a second. Does that mean we're going to have to ship all that material into space and grow crystals? No, because what you can do is you can take those crystals back down to the ground and you can use them as seeds to influence production of crystals into the future. And they've done it. Now, they're not talking about it. Merck has not published that part, but that's what they're doing. And I know that because from my time in pharmaceutical industry, that's what I would do. It's real money, right? It's worth more than its weight in gold. And that's how you have to look at what we're doing in space. It's expensive, even if you're doing it at only $10,000 a kilo to get your stuff in space, and we're not there yet. That means you're starting with something that's costing you $10,000 more than if you did it on Earth. Tried to talk about the fact that there's a barrier between our perception and actual physically getting there, but that barrier is being broken. And people are doing work in space, ordinary people. Talked about the fact that you can make money doing other things other than just getting the gold. Enabling the work done in space is a huge industry. Thousands of US companies are participating in. But I'm also telling you there is gold, things that are of real significant value. So I stand before you here today, waving my arms around in my own one-man parade, telling you that there is gold in them there hills. It's time for us all to go get our picks and shovels. Thank you.